Okay, so the House passed a continuing resolution, and I don't really fall on one side of this or the other for the simple fact that there's a lot of decent people seem to be on both sides of the whole thing. Well, at least there's one. Thomas Massey was a no, but there's a lot of great ones who were a yes. We've already talked about this before, and Scott Perry is one of the good ones, one of the few good ones we have in the House of Representatives. He was a yes. Let's talk about the CR, where we're at on everything going forward with Congressman Scott Perry of the great state of Pennsylvania. Congressman, okay, you're generally a big fat no on things like
Correct.
this. Why yes on this one?
So thanks for the opportunity, Jesse. By the way, we love the show. So the reason for this is, look, I went to Washington to stop the confiscation of all our money and the bankrupting of our country and the bankrupting of Americans, right? And so if you're going to save money, look, if the Democrats would actually ever vote to save money, I would probably vote with them, but they never do. So in this case, we're actually cutting some funding. We're freezing spending. And anytime you're freezing spending because of inflation and everything else that goes on in Washington, D.C., you're actually saving some money. It's not a lot, but look, we never save any. So it's some. So number one, saving money. If you don't mind who gets the credit for something, you can do a lot. So, but the only way to get to that point was to vote for this thing. So that's number one. Number two, the administration. So who am I talking about? President Trump, Elon Musk, Russ Vought over at the Office of Management and Budget said, look, if you pass this thing, we're going to do the cutting. You can't, because you got to pass this CR and you're going to need some Democrat votes to do it. You can't cut anything because they won't vote for anything then. But if you do it, we will do the cutting. Well, I'm for the cutting. I don't care who does it as long as somebody does it. So that's number two. Number three, it stops an omnibus. And I'm going to tell you, there were many in Congress, many in congressional leadership that were already working on an omnibus. We're not for that. So this is better than that. This kills the omnibus. Remember, they tried to do one right before Christmas. Elon got a hold of it. A bunch of us were screaming, but he's got a lot of followers. When he hooked onto it and said, this is crazy, everybody said, yes, this is crazy. Now this would be twice in a row we've killed it. So hopefully we're ending the omnibuses forever. Gets rid of all the earmarks. People say, well, that's a couple $1 million. No, that's billions of dollars of jack wagon programs that we don't need. It gets rid of them. And finally, the big thing, it gets us past this hurdle where the Democrats were hoping to stop the momentum, and it gets us to where we really want to be, where the real fight is, which is reconciliation, where we don't need any Democrats, but where we got to force Republicans and Democrats to actually cut federal spending so that the bond market can react, so that the housing market can react, and so that prices overall can come down.
Where are we at? Let's talk about the political gamesmanship of all this now with the United States Senate. It's one thing for the House to pass it. It's quite another for the Senate to pass it. We do need Democrat votes for this or the government shuts down, right?
That's exactly right. And so for the first time in my time in Congress, we have done what conservatives have always wanted us to do. Pass something that is as much conservative as we can get and then leave town. That's what the Senate does. They pass something and then they go away. Well, the House, you got to pass it because this is all we got. Well, finally, for once in my life, the House has passed the bill and we left town. If the Senate Democrats don't want to vote for this, well, God bless them. They can explain to their constituents with all their government programs why they're not getting their government program money. And if they want to do that, every single time, the worst thing that could happen, you could get cancer, you could die of old age, you could have a car wreck. But what's even worse than all those is a government shutdown. Well, now the ball's in their court. What are they going to do?
Let's talk about the Department of Education. Obviously, I'm cheering these cuts, as I'm sure you are. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm pretty sure I can reasonably say that. We are reducing the Department of Education, getting this thing back to the states where it always should have been. But the complete elimination of these departments has to come from Congress, right? I mean, Trump, Elon, Linda McMahon, they can do so much, but Congress has to do something. So will it?
So that's the rub, right? We want the president. First of all, there's no mention whatsoever about education in the Constitution, the United States Constitution. This is totally within the purview of the states, right? So we're right to be taking a look. Let's not forget the fact that ever since the advent of the Department of Education, our test scores have gone down, where the price has gone up for education. So it's been a complete failure. And while the administration can do everything it can, at some point, if Congress doesn't act, the next Democrat in charge is just going to revive it all. Now, the problem's going to be, even if we can get the votes in the House, and look, there are Republicans that probably won't want to vote for that. I'm just saying, but there are going to be Democrats that absolutely will not ever vote for something like that. And of course, some of those reside in the Senate. So the only way you're going to be able to get that is to attach it to something that Democrats are desperately wanting. Let's say like California disaster relief or something like that, where they desperately want it, and you've got to put them in a bad position to have to vote for this to get that, which is what Democrats always do to Republicans, but Republicans never do to Democrats. So I hope we take the opportunity to get some real wins by forcing them to stand up in front of their voters and say, I'm voting for things that aren't in the Constitution because we think that's how it has to be. They take an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution and then snub their nose at it every single day. We have to put them on record with that stuff.
No doubt about it. I'm assuming they're teachers union backers, which really are the beating heart of the Democrat Party. I'm assuming they're going to have a little something to say about a bill like that, California money or no.
Yeah, I'm sure they are. But let's remember, they're the teachers union. They're not the children's union, right? The children's union is their parents and the rest of society fighting for what's good for the children. And the Department of Education can't demonstrably show that it's done anything good for our children or our society. So while the teachers union is going to be there for the union dues and the continued support of the hard left, we have to be advocates for our children and for our nation's future and stand up for them. And I'm sure it's going to be a fight, but it's a worthy fight.
Did you ever get your phone back? A lot of people forget that story. I most definitely do not. Why don't you recap that for us? You get your hands back on that thing?
I did get my phone back. However, the FBI and the Department of Justice kept the data. And Jesse, you can't imagine this, but somewhere along the line, they just made some mistakes of putting that stuff out online, and when they weren't supposed to. And then when we said, hey, you can't put that online, they said, oh, sorry, our bad, and then took it down. But by that time, all the reporters had screenshotted all the stuff. You know how this goes, right? The intimidation and the weaponization of the federal government when the Democrats and the left are in charge goes on unabated.
Congressman, I know it's not really what we're focusing on right now because we're talking about funding bills, but this is why I say we have to have people arrested, government people arrested and thrown in prison. I don't want Democrats arrested and rounded up. I'm not saying that, but when people commit crimes like what you just described, that's got to be a crime. You can't take a position at the FBI, jack a Republican congressman's phone, leak his crap online, and then say, oh, whoopsie, and then get off with probation or getting to retire early. You can't save a country that way. These people have to go to prison.
These people, there needs to be accountability. There needs to be an investigation at the Department of Justice. As you know, Congress has done several investigations. I think they have come up short, but we can only refer charges. Now, in the past, of course, Merrick Garland was there, so referring charges was meaningless. So we ought to revisit some of those investigations, but we need the Department of Justice to go through and do the investigation into these breaches of your privacy and your civil rights, and not just of mine. There are many people across the country that the federal government has been weaponized against. I'm talking about guys like Scott Smith in Virginia, who had the gall to question the school board's allowance of his daughter to be molested in a bathroom, or Mark Houck in Philadelphia, who was arrested under the FACE Act and in the wee hours of the morning under the gunpoint and all that stuff. Those things have to be investigated. Somebody is responsible for those actions, and there needs to be accountability for it. And the American people need to see that so they can begin to trust law enforcement again, that it's not going to be used for political purposes.
Tell me about abolishing the Federal Reserve. I want to talk about something wonderful. That sounds fantastic to me. Tell me about that.
Well, that's indeed, that's a Thomas Massey one-page bill that many of us, myself included, have signed on to. As you know, the Federal Reserve is a private organization of the well-connected, moneyed people in the country with one job, which is to control inflation. Unfortunately, it's become political like everything else. They want to keep their job. And so instead of controlling inflation by telling the truth, they just try and do whatever Joe Biden or Barack Obama tells them to do. And of course, they don't do what President Trump asks them to do. Inflation runs rampant. We keep on spending too much money. They raise interest rates and people can't afford to buy homes or pay for electricity bills. It is a organization that has long overlived, or it probably should have never existed in the first place. Let's face that. And, at a minimum, like, why can't we just audit the Fed? Why can't we at least do that so we know what the hell they're doing with our money?
Yeah, how about that? Congressman, thank you so much. I'm glad at least you got your phone back. Appreciate you, sir. I would thank you for coming to my YouTube channel, but I know how brilliant it is, and I know you love it here. So subscribe and watch. We're going to start really ramping things up and putting some funny stuff, some interesting stuff out there, some collaborations. Either way, my YouTube channel is officially the place to be. So stick around.